Hello guys, welcome back to our Anime Explainer. Today is explanation of upcoming episode Throne of Seal based on novel. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start. Generally speaking, the illusory paradise would be rather peaceful, and they would just encounter the magical beasts guarding the spiritual stoves they'd find. However, some special circumstances could also appear. For instance, if the concentration of killing intent was too intense in the illusory paradise, it could very possibly cause changes to the surroundings. The illusory paradise would produce approximately 20 spiritual stoves every single time, but before these spiritual stoves were truly absorbed, they would remain masterless objects. And that was to say, even if one had temporarily absorbed a spiritual stove, in case he died, the spiritual stove would regain its freedom. Ling Xiao had told them about a story that had happened once, around 300 years ago, when the illusory paradise had opened. At that time, differences had risen among the people from the Temple Alliance, and they had resulted in an intense battle. That time, a change had happened in the illusory paradise, and that change had started on the second day, ending with only 2 people who had returned alive. Furthermore, Ling Xiao had told them sincerely that the best method of gaining a spiritual stove in the illusory paradise was rather to gain the approval from the magical beast acting as its guardian. This dependable method would also enable the humans inside to avoid infuriating the illusory paradise. However, this time it didn't end so peacefully. The demon's slaughter was bound to enrage the illusory paradise. Perhaps the spiritual stoves they already gained were not few, but in case a change appeared on the second day, only those possessing illusory gems, like Long Haochen or Caia, would be able to leave prior to the end of the period of 3 days. Long Haochen gathered his comrades, including Zhong Fangfang, and talked with them about the possible changes Ling Xiao had told them about. Since the situation is like this, I estimate that the illusory paradise will very likely show some changes. In case this happens, we will also face an incredible crisis. Since we have already obtained 4 spiritual stoves, if we leave this place now, it can be considered a fruitful trip. But in case we stay, we will very possibly be unable to leave even if we want to do so later. We will have to wait for the end of the 3-day period to leave. Should we leave or stay? Decide, everyone. Of course we should stay. This is an opportunity that arises only once a century. Who would not be willing to take a risk to gain some more spiritual stoves? Lin Xin said without any hesitation. Sima Xian twitched his mouth, saying with disdain, "What a miser you are." However, I also think we should stay. Everyone from the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad soon came to the same decision. They wanted to stay. In the end, everyone finally looked at Zhong Fangfang, who declared with a smile, "Since you all have decided to stay, I will very possibly be able to obtain a spiritual stove, so I am naturally willing to risk my life with your noble group. Although I feel that staying is a dangerous choice." Zhong Fangfang's greatest quality was his sincerity. Long Haochen could feel that he was a straightforward person and spoke from the deepest parts of his heart, thus he had acknowledged him since long before. "Brother Zhong, we can at least be considered good friends. You are above us all in standards, but didn't take account of our former enmity, and even assisted me several times. Take this, it is an illusory gem. In case you encounter a danger you are unable to resist, no matter in which state the illusory paradise is, you can get transported back by relying on this illusory gem, getting away from the danger." Zhong Fangfang showed some surprise. "Something like this exists. You're giving it to me, but isn't it of use to you too?" Long Haochen smiled calmly, although Brother Zhong didn't say it out loud. "I know that you have some doubts deep inside why my team is here with me. However, this is the secret of my team, and I cannot tell you about it. But what I can tell you is that since I managed to bring them here, I can bring them out as well. Be at ease, this illusory gem is something you have to take. It can be used to save your life at the most crucial time." Zhong Fangfang muttered to himself irresolutely, "Okay, then I won't be overly modest." Then, he took the illusory gem with alacrity. After they finished eating their rations and started to rest, unfortunately, a change happened in the whole illusory paradise. The surroundings flickered as it seemed that the fog covering the boundless forest became thicker, until condensing into dots of light spreading in all directions. Slowly, the illusory paradise's illusory feel was replaced by a sense of reality, and the life energy became stronger from that. However, a somber and desolate atmosphere arose. Daybreak. When the first signs of the morning light started to show, Long Haochen jumped up with alarm. Before starting to rest, They had planned for everyone to take turns to hold vigil, and the one currently keeping watch was Lin Xin. However, he was currently staring up, as if looking at an inconceivable sight. His sound of alarm had immediately woken up everyone, who stared at him, unable to hide their absolute shock. Their shock was due to the changes in the sky. There, they saw a dense multicolored cloud float, encircled by a soft fluctuating energy. This dazzling magic cloud was very moving, and from its core, a colored luster slowly dropped down. Even the radiance of the sun became softer because of that magic cloud. And all the life energy inside the illusory paradise seemed to rotate around it. Is that a spiritual stove? Zhong Fangfang cried out in astonishment. In the midst of that magic cloud was a glint of light that appeared even larger than those released by the other 20 spiritual stoves they had seen the day before. And from this, it could be seen how abnormal this spiritual stove was compared to others. Unconsciously, all looks focused on Long Haochen. The most knowledgeable in the group regarding spiritual stoves was him. However, all they saw was a bitter smile from Long Haochen. I don't know about this spiritual stove either. Out of everything my father had told me about spiritual stoves, there was nothing like this. If this is really a spiritual stove, then there can only be one explanation. This could be one that has never appeared in the continent before, a brand new spiritual stove. Shock was reflected on all faces. They were in fact all demon hunters, and remembered as such an unbound rule in the Demon Hunt Mission Tower. The feat of discovering a new type of spiritual stove that had never appeared before alone would be rewarded with 100,000 contribution points. Han Yu said with a serious tone, "It appears very strange indeed. Yesterday, Captain told us that some change would very possibly appear in the illusory paradise, and today, such a mystical scene appeared in front of us. Perhaps this is really a spiritual stove, but it may also be an enormous trap to lure us." Zhong Fangfang nodded in response. "I agree. How could we be attracted to fight each other without a sufficient enticement? Even if the illusory paradise didn't set any traps, this multicolored spiritual stove moving so slowly in the sky, with its location being in full sight, we will not only meet our allies there, but also some demons for sure." "Haochen, what's your opinion about that?" Long Haochen looked at the multicolored brilliance moving slowly down from the sky. After pondering shortly, he declared, "Going there is unavoidable, even if it's only to save our fellow comrades who came here with us. However, I need to warn everyone once again, if you run across some powerful magical beast, no one is allowed to attack it. Even if they take the initiative to attack us, we have to stay on the defensive. This is an important directive that no one can ignore. Otherwise, it will very possibly waste all our previous efforts." Hearing the serious tone of Long Haochen, the others nodded in succession, expressing their approval. After a short time of pondering, Long Haochen had Zhong Fangfang and Han Yu stay together, handling the defense in the rear, while the rest of the formation didn't change. Under his lead, everyone headed directly in the direction of that multicolored mass descending to the ground. After advancing for less than 100 meters, Long Haochen suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Has anyone found traces of those colored patches of fog? They seem to have disappeared." Everyone looked around and indeed, the very peculiar shining patches of fog glowing in all colors had all disappeared. The surroundings only looked like a huge ordinary forest, with a rich vegetation and nothing more. Long Haochen declared in a deep voice, "It looks like we weren't mistaken, a change is really happening in the illusory paradise." "Boss, what should we do?" Sima Xian asked. Long Haochen lifted his hand, handing bright discipline to Han Yu behind him, as he took out the glorious holy shield for himself. "We still have to advance. Don't forget what I said before, no one is allowed to attack the magical beasts." Kia followed behind Long Haochen all along, observing his confident lead with a gentle look. As expected, her intelligence and her perception were no lower than Long Haochen's. However, she just willingly acted as support for him. She wouldn't meddle in his decision unless Long Haochen was doing a fundamental mistake in his lead. Trust was after all built during this kind of difficult experiences. This was a perfect example of something appearing to be seemingly close, while actually being very far away. In truth, they traveled for a whole hour in pursuit of this multicolored cloud, but were still unable to discern traces of the pieces of light falling into the forest. A deep and low thundering sound echoed in front of them, and suddenly, an immense figure rushed straight at Long Haochen. This figure jumped from a tree above, and appeared so suddenly that even with his superior senses, Long Haochen didn't notice its presence in advance. "Don't move, everyone." Stepping forward, Long Haochen took out the glorious holy shield, holding it vertically. With a loud bang, Long Houchen's body was propelled backwards, and both of his feet left deep marks on the ground. However, that massive black silhouette bounced back as well, landing nearby. The intense light released from the technique Bright Vengeance shone brightly on Long Houchen's figure, as he, without any intent to attack, recovered Blue Rain, hibiscus of light from his other hand. "Don't worry, my friend." Long Houchen did the best to let his own voice sound the gentlest possible, as he looked at that 3 meters tall figure. This was actually the first magical beast they had encountered before, the massive gorilla. The gorilla clearly had a look filled with ill intent, but staring at Long Houchen, he let out an appeased roar. The light elemental fairy Yating flew up to him, whispering something in the gorilla's ears. Long Houchen didn't understand the beast language, but Yating understood his words. Thus, he immediately told her, "Yating, tell this friend that we don't have any evil intent. We only felt the changes on the illusory paradise, and believed that our comrades could be in danger, thus came here to help." Yating rapidly translated Long Houchen's words to the gorilla, who slowly walked in front of Long Houchen, doing a thumbs-up gesture like the last time. Long Houchen didn't have any hesitation to push his own hand against his finger, showing an honest expression. He vaguely understood that the gorilla was able to sense the intentions in its enemies' hearts through some method. Long Houchen truly didn't have any evil intent, and being the innately kind-hearted sign of light, he was purely filled with clean thoughts, to the point that probably no one among all humans could compare to him in that regard. A short time later, the loathing and angered look in the gorilla's eyes vanished gradually, as he nodded in Long Houchen's direction before heading back to the depths of the forest. Yating immediately transmitted to Long Houchen the message to follow him. Under Long Houchen's lead, everyone rapidly followed the gorilla, heading in the dense forest. After walking for less than 100 meters, they saw some formidable magical beasts, with visibly irascible looks, who immediately showed aggressive reactions upon seeing Long Houchen's group of outsiders. It was a chance that they had that gorilla to lead the way. With a low bellow of his, all the hostility towards Long Houchen vanished. In truth, this was the first time someone obtained the true acknowledgement of the magical beasts from the illusory paradise, like Long Houchen did. The process of how he achieved this was however actually pretty simple. First, he made the right choice to treat the magical beasts, as well as the environment in the illusory paradise, with respect, never committing any destructive act. This way, he at least hadn't roused any ill will from the magical beasts. As for the second point why he had gained its acknowledgement, it was simply due to the physique Long Houchen had as the sign of light. What was acknowledged by the illusory paradise was not simply the status as sign of light possessed by Long Houchen, but the status as sign of nature, which was extremely rarely seen, and enabled the bearer to reach the utmost level of harmony with nature. Undoubtedly, the existence of a sign of nature was even less probable than that of a sign of light, but it didn't mean that it hadn't appeared before. The previous sign of nature to appear was the founder of the illusory paradise, the goddess of nature. Thus, she should be called daughter of nature. Following possessors of a physique such as that of the sign of nature, the next ones to follow in the ranking would be the two most related to the energy of life, water and light. Those were even above the wood and earth element in importance. As the sign of light, Long Houchen naturally showed concern towards the illusory paradise, and the test given to him by the gorilla was a test the illusory paradise itself gave to him. After passing it by relying on his sincere nature, he had gained the acknowledgement of the illusory paradise, and all its inhabitants. Since they managed to blend with the inhabitants of the illusory paradise, this implied that the rather weak group of Long Houchen gained the support of the illusory paradise. This thought didn't cause Long Houchen to relax. It instead increased his worries towards the rules of the illusory paradise even further. After a day of contact, he discovered that although the illusory paradise restricted the strength of its visitors, it also restricted the strength of the residents in the same way. Otherwise, given the massive life spiritual energy in the illusory paradise, how could it be that no magical beast had reached the 9th or the 10th step? Although these magical beasts weren't few in quantity, could they really resist a group as strong as Arbau's? Long Houchen had personally experienced the formidable strength of Arbau, and clearly understood that he had only managed to injure Arbau because of the element of surprise. But in an open one-against-one battle, Long Houchen actually wouldn't stand a chance against Arbau. It could be said that because of their own secrets, Arbau's strength was in fact not that strongly restricted by the rules of the illusory paradise. With the addition of Long Houchen's squad, perhaps they could resist them as a group, but if the demons were determined to attack the magical beast's ranks to get the multicolored spiritual stove, it would be a hard task to defend themselves. Under the lead of the gorilla, they gradually penetrated into the denser jungle, and less than half an hour after their entrance, strong fluctuations of spiritual energy already affected Long Houchen's senses. The battle had started, and it felt extremely intense. However, the most critical part was that he sensed no other existence except from those of darkness and life spiritual energy. After passing through a large forest of shrubs, the battlefield appeared in front of them. It was set on a little hill, surrounded by hundreds of magical beasts. The most surprising thing was that these magical beasts were absolutely not frantic, but instead appeared very organized. They didn't even produce the slightest sound or superfluous noise of rage. On the other side was naturally the demon group. Arbao appeared once again in Long Houchen's line of sight, his injury already healed. Even the demon that the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad had heavily injured, had recovered as well. After a simple count, the total number of demons present was 9. That was to say that with the exception of the fiend, who had used the blue flames and had been killed by Long Houchen's group, the demons didn't suffer any losses even after the past day of trial. And they all had assimilated spiritual stoves, so everyone else is dead without exception. Behind him, Zhong Fangfang revealed a bitter smile. In fact, this time, there had been a lot of captains from Commander Grade Demon Hunt Squad among the Alliance's group. The death of 7 of them would be a severe blow to the Demon Hunt Squads. The present situation was very clear. The objective of Arbao's group was to reach the 100 meters tall hill, and the magical beasts bravely blocked their way forward. The battle was extremely fierce, and although the magical beasts couldn't compare to the demons in individual strength, their coordination was extremely good. They were neatly organized and surrounded the demons from all sides. Their cooperation was the determining factor in blocking the demons' way. The gorilla let out a furious roar, looking back at Long Houchen's group before rushing to the hill. Long Houchen and his comrades followed with haste. Because the gorilla was opening the way, roaring lowly, the magical beasts battling the demons didn't block their way. As they appeared, Long Houchen's group naturally attracted Arbao's attention. Seeing them, he actually went straight for the mountain. Determination filled Arbao's eyes. Transforming his arms into a pair of dragon claws, he tore a magical beast to shreds, leading the other 8 to charge at great speed. Right at that time, a resonant sound was clearly heard on these hills, and the attacks from the magical beasts instantly became a lot fiercer. With united strength, they forcibly drove the demons back to their original place. On the top of the hill, a 6 or 7 years old looking girl emerged. She had a cute jade-like appearance. Her skin looked fair, and her most noticeable trait was her baby face. Her long light blue hair was braided into twin tails, and with a slight movement of her hand, she pointed her tender finger downwards. As she spoke, her voice sounded quite frail. She's commanding the magical beasts. Long Houchen looked at this young lady with shock, following the gorilla to the peak of the mountain. The smell of life energy was even more vigorous here, and came with an exuberant feel. That beautiful young lady's face was however filled with anger, and her big dark green eyes were filled with great determination. I am Long Houchen. You can call me directly by my first name. Long Houchen told her with a smile. As the girl commanded the battle, she turned her head and replied, I am Yi Xiaolei. Although I don't really like this name, it has been chosen by my older sister for me, and I cannot change it. You can call me Xiaolei. After saying this, her voice turned odd, issuing a series of orders. The magical beasts below once again changed their formation, increasing their aggression. At that moment, magical beasts kept joining the battle on the hillside. It looked like the 9 demons were pressured hard. And furthermore, their battle power would be consumed as the battle kept going on. Zhong Fangfang stood on the side, tightly compressing his lips. He was currently filled with complete shock. It was the same for the others who also had unusual expressions on their faces, occasionally peeking a glance towards the young girl. The reason for this was simple. It was because that so-called Yi Xiaolei girl emitted a faint multicolored radiance. But except from her, no other multicolored existence was on this hilltop. Could she be the multicolored radiance that descended from the sky? Zhong Fangfang had another issue he was puzzled over. Why would this young girl call Long Houchen Sign of Light? It could be said that they already held a considerable advantage, because they were on the side of the illusory paradise. But how did Long Houchen manage to achieve this so smoothly? The battle kept going on, and Long Houchen cautiously watched Yi Xiaolei's command. Although he didn't understand the language used by Yi Xiaolei, he could determine her commanding patterns. Yi Xiaolei's orders were actually not that complicated. First of all, she made these magical beasts act as a whole, just the same as an army in battle, not letting them break ranks. This way there wouldn't be any meaningless sacrifices. On the front lines were magical beasts, with astonishing defensive strength, that could meet force with force, attacking the demons head-on, whereas the magical beasts on the rear were adept in magical attacks. This sort of battle formation was the same as the one used by humans. Every time a powerful ability was launched by the group of 9 demons, Yi Xiaomo would then put all her energy into ordering the magical beasts to retreat, or launch their own wildest attacks, to either evade, block, or break through the enemy's abilities. The group of 9 demons couldn't be said to have such great coordination, but their individual strength was high. Even the strength of Yu Yi was a lot greater than in the past. Bao was all the more powerful, to the point that the magical beasts were unable to cause any damage to him. But even under those circumstances, they were being held back, unable to break through the magical beasts' ranks, and the damage they managed to inflict to the magical beasts was limited as well. Long Haochen had originally been unable to calm down, but with a commander such as Ye Xiaolei here, even those strong demons had a hard time assaulting them. This was after all the illusory paradise, her home ground. However, Long Haochen also felt curious about the identity of this Ye Xiaolei. The multicolored light she emitted implied that she was very possibly the origin of the multicolored cloud of light, which had been soaring in the sky. However, how was it that she was shaped like a human? Could it be that she at this point, Long Haochen felt some astonishment deep inside, thinking about the words his father had told him before, regarding the tiers of spiritual stoves. Long Xingyu had told Long Haochen that spiritual stoves were also classified into tiers, encompassing 5 different levels. Among them, the Saint spiritual stove Long Haochen possessed only reached the 5th, which was also the lowest one. The tiers of spiritual stoves were divided based on their utility, as well as their might and potential for growth, and also their overall evaluation. The reason why the Saint spiritual stove was only at the 5th tier was that its particular nurturing ability had never been published by the Night Temple, or else it would very possibly have reached the 3rd tier. At the 4th tier, diverse spiritual stoves would be present. The overwhelming majority of them didn't only possess one ability, and this was their main difference with the spiritual stoves of the 5th tier. Spiritual stoves of the 3rd tier also possessed 2 or more abilities, and were bound to reach a certain level of power in battle. The Saint spiritual stove Long Haochen possessed only had a pulling or attracting ability, whose ranges were also limited. They were effectful, but they couldn't be called really powerful. Kia's Thousand Strikes spiritual stove belonged to the 3rd tier. It was just that it had yet to evolve, which was the reason why the Thousand Strikes spiritual stoves was at the moment only able to activate a single offensive ability. However, in case she managed to let it evolve, the Thousand Strikes spiritual stove would gain a great amount of strength. At the 2nd tier were the most powerful spiritual stoves known to humans. Among the 74 spiritual stoves known in total, only 7 reached this tier, each of which had at the least 3 abilities. Of course, their backlash effects would also be quite severe. There were also some with a single ability among this tier, but it would be an ability with incomparable power. Like for instance the spiritual stove which Kia's father possessed. As for spiritual stoves of the 1st tier, only one existed at the present time, and it was Kia's spiritual stove of samsara. Spiritual stoves of the 1st tier weren't classified as such for the number of abilities they possessed, but for the bursting power erupting when they were unleashed. The requirements for a spiritual stove to be classified at the 1st tier were very simple, it only had to make up for 2 steps of difference. If a spiritual stove could permit its user to kill powerhouses 2 steps above their own cultivation, this spiritual stove would then be ranked at the 1st tier. Until this day, only Kia's spiritual stove of samsara had managed to fulfill these criteria. Of course, its backlash was also very well known to Long Haochen. At that time, when Long Xingyu had told Long Haochen about the 5 tiers of spiritual stoves, he had also told Long Haochen a last thing, that in legends, another type of spiritual stoves existed, which could even exceed the 1st tier. However, it had been said to have only appeared in legends. It had never existed in the history of the Temple Alliance, but it had been reported that once in the glorious era, the emperor of the most powerful of the 3 empires had possessed that kind of spiritual stove. In legends, that type of spiritual stove was known as intelligent spiritual stove. That was to say that the main body of the spiritual stove didn't take the shape of a heavenly treasure, but had a genuine living body, possessing advanced knowledge and intelligence. The possible evolutions for such a spiritual stove were unlimited, thus making its assessment hard. However, Long Haochen had assumed at that time that this kind of spiritual stove was only part of legends and nothing more. But it didn't mean that it couldn't appear. Looking at the commanding Yi Xiaolei, Long Haochen couldn't help but feel secretly astonished. Could this young girl be one of the legendary spiritual stoves father spoke about? He couldn't ascertain it, but if this was true, Yi Xiaolei's identity wouldn't be hard to predict. The older sister she just spoke about would then be the founder of this illusory paradise, whereas she should be its guardian. Just when Long Haochen was deeply pondering, a change appeared on the battlefield below. Completely suppressed by the magical beasts, the strength of the 9 demons suddenly weakened, and the magical beasts attacking them suddenly pulled back. There was a simple reason for the sudden decrease in the strength of their attacks. Bao suddenly showed signs of withdrawing, placing himself in the midst of his allies. His body was covered by an orange glint, and it looked as if the demon, who had been wounded by the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad, was telling him something at the same time. His expression was as indifferent as before, but the orange spell was visibly not as peaceful. Be careful, they are most likely preparing something. Long Haochen told the nearby Yi Xiaolei in a low voice, yeah. Yi Xiaolei gave a calm reply, but her expression immediately became extremely serious. Although nothing had happened yet, she also felt something was amiss. Even from such a distance, Long Haochen could faintly feel that the energy surrounding Bao felt just like that of someone about to use a forbidden spell. That orange demon's spell seemed to resist its activation, as if it wanted to reverse the situation on the battlefield. But at that time, signs of dispute seemed to appear between the 2 demons. This is abnormal. If Bao is the prince of the devil dragons, would his words really get refuted? Unless, be careful, they are probably trying to break the restrictions of the illusory paradise. Long Haochen said hastily. Right at that time, that demon mage was finally persuaded by Bao, returning its attention back to the battle. Now, an orange radiance was released from their bodies. That orange color wasn't really intense, but it was strong enough to give a strange feeling. The breath of life seemed to freeze phased by the appearance of that orange color. More astonishing, this radiance looked like its strength didn't exceed the 10,000 units of spiritual energy. How could this happen? Both Long Haochen and Yi Xiaolei seemed at a loss. They had felt the pressure of this orange radiance before, but how was it that it still remained within the scope of the restriction? Zhong Fangfang suddenly said, a star demon. That person is probably a star demon. Be careful, he is using the technique of great prophecy. Hearing the words great prophecy, huge changes immediately appeared on Long Haochen's face. The technique of great prophecy was a powerful magic specific to the star clan, which only the star demon god's direct lineage was able to use. It came with a compensation so high that even the star demon god himself had to pay with a part of his life essence to use it. But without the support from the demon god pillar, using the technique of great prophecy would cost the user his life. The technique of great prophecy didn't really belong to the magic category, but couldn't really be rated otherwise either. It could instead be called a godly technique. Would the use of this technique enable him to avoid breaking the rules of this place? Right at that time, Yi Xiaolei suddenly shivered at Long Haochen's side. Immediately afterwards, the multicolored glow from her became more intense, and a tyrannical breath of life was emitted from her, spreading in every direction. At that time, Long Haochen's group of 8 noticed with astonishment that their own spiritual energy was instantly strengthened. This wasn't a simple restoration of spiritual energy, but their spiritual energy was just increasing in the same way as if they were cultivating. Long Haochen, this technique of great prophecy is sealing me. The seal will last for an hour. Protect me, just for this hour. When I throw it off again, they will all die. Yi Xiaolei's frail and childish voice was filled with rage and determination, but she slowly sat in a cross-legged fashion, placed her palms together on her chest and shut her eyes. At that time, the breath of life from her increased severalfold, turning into the shape of a green ring of light spreading onwards. A sort of moaning sound came out from Lin Xin, Wang Yuanyuan, Sima Xian, Chen Ying'er and Han Yu, and pairs of spiritual wings extended from the 5 of them for the first time. This was the crucial time of their breakthrough, the opening of their spiritual cavities. The gift Yi Xiaolei offered them was invaluable, helping the 5 of them to break through the bottleneck of the 6th step. If they had cultivated normally, even several more months wouldn't necessarily have been enough for them to accomplish this. However, at the time she released the green ring of light, Yi Xiaolei's body was surrounded by an orange light, sealing her inside and stopping all the aura from surging out. The technique of great prophecy was an extremely powerful godly technique, of incredible and various uses. With such immense compensation cost, how could its power be lacking? Simply said, if it was used on an ordinary person, and if the chosen prophecy was death, it would just cause immediate death. But Yi Xiaolei was not an ordinary person. At that time, even the technique of great prophecy used on her could only temporarily seal her and nothing more. Bao's face became grave and stern, but this was absolutely not because he was moved by his comrade's death. It was by swearing an oath that he had gotten this ally to use the technique of great prophecy at the crucial time. Although the cost they paid was considerable, if they managed to obtain Yi Xiaolei that stood on top of the mountain, it would have been worth it. It was not just him, but even the demon god emperor would covet Yi Xiaolei. The demons didn't spare any cost to attack the southern city's mountain pass, also devoting a lot on this trade with the Temple Alliance. For them to dispatch 10 demons to enter the illusory paradise, there had only been one goal, and that was Yi Xiaolei. The Temple Alliance's side believed themselves to have the advantage in this trade, but they didn't know that Yi Xiaolei was of utter importance to the demons, and particularly to the demon god emperor. However, this secret was only known to the demon god emperor and Bao, who shared a father and son relationship. Having lost Yi Xiaolei's lead, the magical beast's attack became frantic. Filled with wrath, they initiated mad attacks at the demons. Although they contained a great level of strength, after the loss of their coordination, their efforts became fruitless. A purple glow was released from Bao's eyes, enveloping the 7 of them in its range, and all of the group was immediately surrounded by a purple-black haze. 5 of them still needed time to adapt to the changes after their breakthrough, having gained the boost from the spiritual cavities and the spiritual wings. And furthermore, given how frantic the situation below was, even if they joined, they couldn't do very much. Because of Yi Xiaolei's sealing, the magical beast were totally out of their minds with rage. Joining the melee could even be regarded as an enemy attack by them. The breath of life released by Yi Xiaomo had caused a good increase to their total amount of spiritual energy, in addition to having helped Lin Xin and the other 4 to break through to the 6th step. Now they had to return this gift. And furthermore, even if not for that, Long Haochen would still give priority to the protection of his comrades. He had made his preparations well, and if things didn't go as planned, he would bring Yi Xiaolei along with them to the Tower of Eternity. Of course, that was just the last resort. Unless it reached the point of no return, he would absolutely not do so, for the simple reason that although the Tower of Eternity had holy properties, it was still filled with energy of death. It was impossible to predict which effect entering it would have on her. However, the difference in build didn't mean they were any weaker than earth dragons in strength. In the opposite, their purely offensive combat methods were actually not that much inferior to Bao. Their sturdy forearms and their horn forming an obtuse angle were life-destroying weapons, while their black scales gave them an extreme defensive strength. Just by themselves, the 3 of them stopped all the attacks directed to their group. In the rear of the group of 8 were 3 other close-quarter warriors, among which Ling Xiao acted as the core. At the 2 at the sides of Ling Xiao were demons issued from variations of magical beasts. The first had an imposing build, appearing like a giant bear. From his body, deep yellow light was continuously released. At every rush from the magical beasts, he would energetically stamp on the ground, launching intense shocking surges of energy, causing even large areas of cracks to appear on the ground. On Ling Xiao's other side was a lion-shaped powerhouse with a human body, also extremely tough in strength. Yu Yi and another female mage were positioned between these 2 subgroups, releasing their magic from there. Although the core of the entire team was Bao, its conductor was Yu Yi. The staff in her hands was exchanged for a deep purple one, and intense surges of magic spread continuously from it, giving the other demons a magic boost while healing them. The other demon female at her side was clad in red, looking the same as a human, with the exception that her temper was a lot more fiery. Her figure was quite something, particularly her watermelon-like chest, combined with her slim waist and her rising butt. This figure reached a level a human wouldn't possibly be able to reach. On her hand were 2 coral-shaped staves, shaking in the air, and dark red glows were continuously shot from it. All the magical beast victims of her attacks were pulverized with an extremely great power, and all she used were single-target attacks. No large-scale attacks were launched by her. After the loss of Yi Xiaolei's lead, the attacks from the magical beasts gradually became more and more chaotic. This lump of frantic attacks lost all discipline, and without a brain to lead the armies, they ended up only being pushed by these 8 demons. No matter how berserk their attacks were, they were still unable to stop the advance of the group of demons. Long Haochen was standing on the mountain top, still motionless, only occasionally looking at Yu Yi. If he could command the magical beast, perhaps they could still stop the enemies like they did before, but he couldn't. All he could do now was to rely on the terrain to try to stall for time. An hour was a very long period of time, and under the influence of Arbao's spell, these demon powerhouses didn't feel the least exhausted, pushing forward every second. Every step they took forward, quite a few magical beasts' blood and internal organs would scatter in the air. After the sealing of Yi Xiaolei by the Great Prophecy technique, the reinforcements of magical beasts surging from all directions lessened. This was another piece of bad news. Kia calmly joined Long Houchen's side, telling him in low voice, should this be done? Although she didn't put it clearly in words, Long Houchen understood what she meant, and lightly shook his head in response, now is not the time yet. Kia lowered her head, and didn't say anything more. Long Houchen turned back to Han Yu, doing a hand gesture to him. Han Yu immediately understood his meaning, and joined his side, stating the chant of a slow incantation. Meanwhile, Yating, who was behind Long Houchen, also started to chant. At this moment, the group of 8 demons was gradually closing the distance between the hilltop. Of course, as they advanced, the attacks of the magical beast became even more frantic. With the rise of the danger facing Yi Xiaolei, they wouldn't shrink even if they had to sacrifice their own lives. A faint mantle of light spread from the mountain, shrouding the battlefield. After staying sluggish for a short time, Chen Ying nodded in response. The look she gave Long Houchen suddenly became quite different. Sima Xian and Wang Yuanyuan were already at either side of Long Houchen, prepared well. It seemed that the enemies were now only at a distance of 100 meters, but this could be covered in a few dashes by a powerhouse. Healing spells started to emanate unceasingly from the mountain, and the magical beasts receiving its effects didn't only recover from their injuries, but also calmed down from their frenetic state. To them, the fact that healing magic was released from the top of the mountain implied that Yi Xiaolei was all right. And so long as they could maintain their own judgment, the powerhouses before them were nothing to fear. Long Houchen told Yating, use the language they can understand to tell them that Yi Xiaolei is only temporarily sealed, and will need some time to liberate herself. We'll need to delay the enemy for at least an hour. Yating nodded lightly, flying in front of Long Houchen and grumbling some words. Under the effects of the light essence, her voice was spread afar. Hearing Yating's voice, the group of magical beasts immediately burst out in utter rage. The fact that Yi Xiaolei had been sealed by these enemies was to them a total disgrace. But their morale was instantly raised up, and supported by the healing spells from the mountain, the magical beasts' attacks became more coordinated. Long Houchen gave a glance to the sky, before looking at Yi Xiaolei next, hardening his inner determination and resolve. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.